Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Quin Wills about his time at Cambridge and Oxford universities, his early exploration of single-cell genomics, RNA, and gene regulation, and his experience founding Simugen during his graduate studies. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 2 a listen. In part 3, we talk with Quin about his time at the Mayo Clinic, the dynamics of collaboration between academia and industry, including his experience at Novo Nordisk. We also discuss the founding principles and evolution of Ochre Bio, and the decision to pivot towards a more traditional bioinformatics approach. Quin shares insights on navigating the global financial crisis of 2008 and the realization that a shift in focus was necessary for the company's survival.
That's a juicy one. So on the topic of pivoting, the company evolved very quickly. So first lesson was we can't be a software service. We need to actually offer the whole product. People need to have a protocol, there's cell types that we run, what to put on arrays, and then of course there's the software that comes with the bioinformatics behind it, that it will analyze it and give you like, boom, this is why. These are the pathways that activate it. And so there was that. Then we also, unfortunately, had the global meltdown in 2009. And so we were one of those classic tough between a rock and a hard place, because underfunded, it's a big problem. And so, eventually there was this feeling that we should turn it more into a more traditional bioinformatics company, which was really, again, it's about knowing yourself and what works for you. And it was just didn't really, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly sound idea. It's a good thing to go for. But I felt like, okay, at the time, I'm not the right person to lead that kind of initiative. I want to do something else. So moved on and decided to move to America.
Yes. So I know you're at the Mayo Clinic. How was that experience?
Mayo is something else. Hey, you as a clinician, you've not seen anything until you spend time at the Mayo Clinic. That's outrageous. It's an outrageous place. So this was at the Rochester Clinic, the kind of original Mayo Clinic.
The OG,
and it was wonderful. It was wonderful in the sense of got to do a lot of the science that I enjoy. Much more pharmacogenomics. Again, you can see the patterns in my life. I don't want to do genetics for genetics' sake. There has to be an angle here. And so it was very much around pharmacogenomics. Really great colleagues to work with. Really what happened was after a year, I got a call back at Oxford saying, hey, we think we're actually going to start a single cell consortium now. The world is doing this stuff. And so I was like, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the wonderful time. I think I'm going to go and torture myself once again in that little town. And so that was the sort of the first postdoc at Mayo, and then sort of, okay, I'm going to take a career development fellowship then and see where we can go with all this single cell malarkey.
Was that the same supervisor during your PhD?
Yes. Well, I worked for the head.
Who is your supervisor? We need to give him a shout out, because that is incredible. So go start a business. That's cool.
It's actually true. Chris Holmes, the man is a saint. Good old Professor Chris Holmes. I ended up working under somebody else who was running the two profs who were sort of overseeing the consortium, but he was the one who said, you did the single cell stuff. I spoke to folks, so it's not just mentorship, but sponsorship and championship and all the wonderful things for people who help me out in life. So big shout out to Chris for bearing with me. And I came back, helped set up the consortium and get it going. And again, like with a lot of these things, about it, wonderful time. very exciting time because this was the birth of a new field. Oh, the conferences were incredible. The ideas were incredible. But I think for me, one of the big lessons again was learning how to, when do you make waves and when do you ride the waves? So for example, again, in industry, funding has different waves of what's vogue and what's not, and of course you can create your waves and go for it. But life doesn't have to be difficult either. And you need to learn, and it's something that, like, just growing up, you have to learn, like, which waves do you want to ride? And I think, I came into single cell genomics, like, I don't want to just do all this cataloging. Lots of people are going to do cataloging. I have very clear ideas about how I want to use single cell genomics to dissect causality, and I had all these grand ideas. And again, it was, people were not really responsive to it, because at that stage, all people wanted to know was, like, can you catalog my, this tissue? And I want to see all the new cell types that we've not been studying. And and I feel like and it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I feel like I'm being dismissive of that. It was a very important first phase of single cell genomics. But I think I really had it in my mind that we're going to change this. And I was like, no, this wave is going to be here for a few years while the field finds itself and everyone gets excited about the millions of new cells we're going to find. You're going to have to ride that one out. And I should have probably written that one out a bit better.
And that's I see that both on the science front and also on the business front too. Obviously, there's like the AI wave, that everyone wants to be riding right now. And I guess there's also it's kind of like a personality, being kind of introspective about your personality type, for the sheer will to create your own wave. For me, that doesn't necessarily match my personality type. I don't know if I can just so we're Exceeder's an equipment leasing business. That wave has been that has been a wave for centuries. That's a century-old wave, right? And whereas the advent of AI, there are these large institutions and small, obviously open AI and so on and so forth, who are kind of willing this thing into existence. And it's kind of at least for me, at early days, I was like, maybe I can be that wave creator. But I had to be honest with myself, that's not my natural disposition. And so maybe I'm going to ride out this existing wave. And once I kind of had that honest kind of conversation with myself, it just gelled after that. And I didn't have to beat myself up over the fact that I'm not creating this this thing that didn't exist and now everyone get on board. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's okay. You could do it both ways.
That's the thing. And you should learn to do both ways, and it's the same in all these things. Another thing that I don't describe, there's a lot of, I think, quite frankly, very California inspired ideas around entrepreneurship, which are just nonsense.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I think so.
No, I'll probably get a lot of hate mail for that comment. But, in one of them is this radical revolution, break everything. I'm like, no. Evolution, you got to learn to play that game of evolution versus revolution in things. And you've got to be able to switch between the two if you want, longevity to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And also I think it's, it can be varied in scale. You can be innovative and creative on different scales. It doesn't have to be this completely universe changing thing. Even within your own field of study, you can still innovate in its own ways. So something you don't have to, again, beat yourself up if you're not everybody get on board or you're not with it. So now you're doing your single cell genomics fellowship, and I know you then you joined the Novo Nordisk Research Center. How did that? And what was Oxford's kind of collaboration with Novo Nordisk, and how did you get involved?
So this was it was a really great idea. And it emulated, I think, a lot of similar ideas that other pharma companies have had, saying academia and pharma are two very big engines, be very slow engines. What if we set up these high innovation centers that behave more like biotechs? And Novo is not the only company to say this. And varying degrees of success. I'm choosing my words very carefully now. Even more hate mail.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's controversial to say that. If you look at a lot of these high centers for innovation, very varying levels of success. The Novo one was based on the same idea, and it was get a few of us to start departments, like our own little mini biotechs in many ways, or like biotech. And because we were going to be based in Oxford, we could run like a little mini company, but then also bring in postdoctoral talent from the university. So it was a really fantastic idea around sort of building innovation in a space that sometimes pharma and academia can struggle with.
Interesting. And I know you like built a team. You kind of like set up. You put the legs. You put up some legs underneath it. Can you talk a little bit about that experience of like building a biotech within like an academic institution?
Yeah, it was cool. There were a lot of learnings in that one. How not to kill people, because it was quite a thing. Those of us, the original sort of founding heads, it was a virtual institute. The building hadn't even been built yet. So we were renting space, labs at the back of one of the university institutes. And the first thing the university did was lock all the doors connecting us versus them, because we were going to steal everyone's IP. No, this actually happened. So there was a lot. I think the biggest lessons I learned there, because I'm not talking about personal weaknesses and self-reflections and what you're good at. I suck at politics. I'm a really bad politician. I find it very draining. And that was my first big lesson in bigger politics, because you had this big, and even bigger now, Novo, this incredible pharma company with a very strong vision of where it wants to go. And you have Oxford with its own brand and very strong vision of what it wants from this. And I was like, oh man, you are just going to get yourself into a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Sounds like you were getting caught in some like maybe potential crossfire. Like,
it was, and again, don't get me wrong, it was the early days. Things got sold. We moved on, but it was, when you play on the edge of things can get prickly sometimes. And a lot of us had to learn very quickly about, stakeholder management and all the big grown-up things that you need to learn at some stage.
And that's really interesting, like thinking about like these two very strong cultures coming together to collaborate. And I've always thought about it from, it's just like, in this kind, you see it in like M&A activity. Like, there's just like very strong cultures, and it's always a big question mark. Is there going to be organ rejection, like upon the joining of the two entities or the acquisition or whatever it may be? And I also don't do well with politics. I probably would just be like melting, just like, no, like, why does it have to be this way? But it's very like probably hard, again, kind of like the thing where you learn firsthand, you learn these lessons, and you internalize it. It's like seared into you.
Well, you hope you learn, hey?
You knock on wood. You hope you do. And so I guess
no, you do. These are very powerful lessons, because again, when you're younger, you can shout about it, and again, I'm going to make waves, and I'm going a lot of the world is about stakeholder management, learning which waves to ride, which battles to pick. It's grown-up stuff.
Yeah, and if you're looking back on that experience, what would you say were the like key lessons that you learned and you internalize and do take with you to this day?
I think, there are a lot of things I think I would have done better. I think I should have focused a lot more on the people element of what was going on, because I was very, very focused on, let's just get on with the science. These things will solve themselves. Let this happen. Let's just get on. Science will speak for itself. Yep. Of course, that never will happen. So there was really a big lesson in there. But I think for me, a lot of what I took away was just the the incredible scientists at Novo Nordisk attract some of the most incredible talent in the world. Some really just talented, big thinking, forward thinking at all levels scientists, and there was just a lot of inspiration to come out of those. Again, it wasn't big machines, wasn't my thing. It ended up being a big machine again. It's not my phenotype, and I had to be honest about that. But I learned a lot of wonderful things from a lot of wonderful people there.
That's awesome. And I remember we had Berkeley was, when I was there, was like kind of had a similar Novo Novartis kind of research collaboration. And I can see I wasn't in the fray, but I could definitely see, because one of the labs that I was in participated in that kind of like structure. So I know exactly that feeling of like, there's a bit of a push and pull when it comes to like these big pharma collaborations. And so now, you've been thrown into the fire. You're like, okay, this is like, something you had these hard learned lessons. And we're now getting closer to the present day. When did you know it was time to leave the research center and then start Ochre Bio?
Well, a lot of Ochre's origins are with Novo Nordisk. I say that quietly, just in case it's but it did. A lot of the first, and I can't even fully claim credit for this. So this was a scientist in my team at Novo. He's a scientist, another one who deserves a big shout out. Who's now a scientist in my team now at Ochre, who was good friends with a transplant surgeon, and they had a dinner, as these things often happen, had a dinner conversation where it's like, are we keeping livers alive on machines these days? Do you want to sequence a few and just see if at a genomic level we can see what seems to be driving some of the physiology and the things that we're seeing? And we're like, sure, we'll give that a go. And it was just fascinating. I couldn't believe it was one of those moments, one of those aha moments where it's like, oh, this is much better than I expected. And so there's a lot of these original ideas about the kind of data we want to generate, models that make sense. But it wasn't an idea that was going to be championed anytime at Novo. And so time to go and do things on my own. Well, not on my own. I sort of again co-founded and sort of brought these ideas along and started Ochre.
And were your co-founders from the same program?
No. I was there. I didn't want to have, this time around, I really didn't want to have another scientific co-founder. I wanted somebody who came from industry, who understood a lot of the industry path, and really would be more outward facing in terms of, driving investments and so that I could focus on the science, because there was a lot to do getting Ochre started.
Can you talk a little bit about that? About like how did you get in touch with your co-founder who's, on this kind of more like business, facing side? How did that come to be? And how did you guys jointly kind of map out Ochre's mission and focus?
Yeah, no, it's a story we love to tell. It's, so I think that the scientific essence of Ochre was there, and it was this notion that, and it sounds so simple to say, really difficult to do. We want to be a liver therapeutics company that does three things brilliantly: better discovery, better validation. So this is where using human livers and whatnot as for internal conviction, and better clinical trials. And that is clinical trial structure, better modalities like RNA, all that kind of thing. So the kernels of that idea, I think, were already all there. And so I did what is, what was a sensible thing in my mind, but apparently is crazy, is I went and lived in Costa Rica for a while. I went and built a treehouse, building a treehouse, and just hid away from the world while I was reflecting. On what you want to do, where you want to go, while the insects in the jungle are eating you alive. And it sounds like a story, but it's true. So, decided to start building some solar-powered Wi-Fi in the jungle, or 3G to Wi-Fi, so I could get better signal, because it was really difficult to stay in contact with the outside world at that stage. And one of the first calls I got was from a gentleman in London and gave me this big sell. And I was like, oh, this sounds like you're trying to sell me an incubator, one of these accelerator things. I'm like, hey, I think I'm a little bit too old for that now. So it's actually not true. You're never too old for that kind of stuff. But and he's like, no. This is different. This is more about finding the perfect, complementary co-founders. And so it was one of those, and spoke to a lot of folks, and I got introduced to a lot of folks. And then Jack, my co-founder, it was just one of those moments where I first phoned him, and he was in the airport in Tanzania building huts out there. And we just realized very quickly there was just this very similar phenotypes, or the right kind of mix of phenotypes, I think, for starting a company. And I was, he's been the best co-founder to start a company with, for sure.
That is a crazy co-founder meeting story, to be honest. Like, both of you were like, building huts, and you're just like, oh, it's like two peas in a pod. Like, how was that?
You're crazy, I'm crazy. No, but it just reflects about, I think, a certain level of wanting to do stuff and energy and going out, and and that was it, and then really then started, and as co-founders, again, tried very hard. And again, I'm not going to pretend I suck at so much. I just live for a day when I don't suck so much at things. But, very quick, before we got into the side this time around, focus on our values. I call them laws. I'm a bit more Gen X. I talk about laws, not values. But, the basic fundamental values of how we're going to operate as a company and do things, and really got those tied down before we even went out to pitch first money and the science and how we're going to do stuff.
I'd love to double click on that. Could you tell us what are the laws of Ochre Bio?
The laws.
The values.
They're actually deceptively simple. And I think people misunderstand what they are. So let me tell you what they are, and then I'll tell you what the inspiration behind them are, and I'll explain. So Clark's law, or Clark's third law: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It's Murphy's law: anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And then there's Wheaton's law: don't be a dick. And people are like, where does this all come from? What is it? It comes from one thing, and it's it really, so people talk about, I suppose, business philosophies and what drives you. And in terms, so I think, again, I'm not going to pretend I don't suck at this, but I do think a lot about the essence of innovation and what works in certain cultures versus other cultures. And I really feel quite strongly that failure cultures are a good failure culture is at the essence of innovation, and something that Europeans still struggle a lot with versus the US. Again, I'm not going to pick on the Europeans too much, but it is, there is the failure culture isn't always as healthy as it could be, I feel. And there are really three failure modes, and that's where the laws come from. And the first is you're not ambitious enough. You don't create that magical technology because you're scared of failure. We're not here. Failure is part of that. 9 out of 10 are going to fail, and that's the way this works. That's venture capital, right? That's the game. You owe it to your shareholders to be ambitious. It's not about being crazy, but you have to be ambitious. You have to start ambitious companies, not incremental. So that's where the first law comes from. And the second law is about understanding that failure is going to happen all the time. So most of our experiments fail. It's just the way it is. And but it should never be an excuse. You have to learn, nobody's allowed to come with that as an excuse. You learn quickly and you move on from that. So that's about planning, having plan Bs, quick iteration, your quick cycles, all the things that people love to talk about, and we all still generally are bad at in biology. But that's where that one comes from. And then the third one is, and this has been a big failure mode I've noticed running transdisciplinary teams, is tribalism. And so don't be a dick factor is about being supportive to each other. Other teams will fail you, and inevitably you will not understand why. Does the analysts, the computationalists again, they took too long to get the data back to us, and they didn't write do the right analysis. And the chemists are annoyed with the biologists because the cells weren't ready in time to screen the latest lead. It's all that. And it very quickly descends into, it becomes this descent, right, into tribalism so quickly, all the time, because it's such a human thing to do. The other, blame the other.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's not about, I'm always quick to say, it's not about being nice. It's not about being, because I'm not a nice guy. I'm not nice. Do not make that the headline of this.
Yeah.
He's not a nice guy. But it's not. It's not about being nice. And it's not about baking cakes, and these things are all lovely, and we do it. The team have a wonderful culture that they built, but it is about understanding that failure is going to permeate everything you do and others. So be supportive with each other.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Quin Wills. Tune in for part 3 of our conversation to learn more about his journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Biotech Startups podcast, part 4 of Quin's story. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.